Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into uh, a really intriguing piece of lore, the lost treasure of Ching Hung. Our source for this one is an entry from the Jackie Chan Adventures Wiki, which is, well, a treasure trove itself, really. So our mission today, uncover the full story of this legendary, absolutely vast, and, as it turns out, pretty ill-fated fortune. Yeah, we're talking about a treasure promised to be worth, get this, 10,000 times what Valmont owned in lost assets. But then there was a broken deal and this really dramatic, unexpected end. Okay, let's unpack this. So right off the bat, this lost treasure of Ching Hung, it's described as legendary and vast treasure. And the wiki is clear.
Yeah.
It was in the possession of Shendu, the demon sorcerer.
Right. And what's fascinating here is just the sheer scale of what was promised. Shendu offers this immense wealth to Velmont, the criminal mastermind, right, in exchange for getting the talismans back. I mean, 10,000 times what Velmont owned in lost assets. It's almost hard to even picture that kind of wealth being dangled. A classic move, using immense reward to motivate someone.
Definitely. But here's where it gets really interesting. The turning point. The talismans, or most of them anyway, they get delivered. And Shendu, well, he reneged on the deal, just backed out. So what was his justification? How to get away with that? Well, his reasoning was pretty specific, almost lawyerly, you could say. He claimed it wasn't Valmont who returned the talismans. Technically, it was Jackie Chan's dark half.
Mm-hmm.
And that dark half, of course, that was created when the tiger talisman got split. The one that separates good and evil.
Yeah, and that detail is fascinating. It immediately makes you question the nature of these kinds of magical agreements. Like for Shendu, the literal identity of the person handing them over was the deciding factor. It feels like a very convenient loophole for him, doesn't it? It really highlights how these subtle, almost legalistic details can just completely change the outcome, especially when you're dealing with, well, powerful magical beings. It's like the letter of the law versus the spirit, Makes you wonder about powerful players changing the rules in our world too, maybe.
Right? So you can imagine the Dark Hand, Valmont's crew, they were not happy. Not happy at all. So they followed Shendu to his palace. Makes sense. They actually find the treasure. It's there in his vault. And quite reasonably, from their point of view, they attempted to steal as much as they could. They were trying to take what they thought was owed to them. But then things went sideways, fast. The treasure meets this really unexpected, super dramatic end. Just crumbled away to worthless dust. Gone. And this happened exactly when Shendu's body was destroyed by Jade with the dragon talisman, the one with immense destructive power. So imagine that. The Dark Hand thinks they've hit the jackpot, finally getting paid, and it literally disintegrates in front of them. Talk about bad luck.
It's incredible, isn't it? And that timing, that immediate destruction, it tells you everything about the treasure's connection to Shendu. The source is really clear. The treasure was intrinsically linked to Shendu's possessions.
Yeah.
So this wasn't just gold or jewels you could, put in a bag and walk away with. It was tied to his actual being. Its existence depended entirely on his own. When he was destroyed, poof, the treasure was too. It kind of challenges our whole idea of ownership, doesn't it? Some possessions are way more literal, more binding than we think. It's a bit like finding some hidden clause, that completely changes what you thought you owned.
Absolutely. Now, for anyone wanting to see this legendary, albeit doomed, treasure, it did pop up a couple of times in the show. You can see it in Season 1, Episode 5. That was Shell Game.
Mm-hmm.
And then again in Season 1, Episode 13, Day of the Dragon. That was the big finale where it all, crumbled. Oh, and speaking of the name, Ching Hung, the wiki points out something pretty cool. It says the name may be based off of the real Chinese emperor, Qin Shi Huang.
Yeah, that's a fascinating little detail. It's interesting how often fictional stories, especially fantasy and adventure, borrow from real history or legend, taking inspiration from someone like Qin Shi Huang, who's associated with, immense power, unification, and famously hidden tombs and perhaps treasures. It just grounds the fantasy a bit, adds a layer of depth, that sort of echo of real-world grandeur, even if his real treasure, presumably, didn't turn to dust.
So, okay, we've gone through the story, the details, but you might be sitting there thinking, why should I care about a fictional treasure from a cartoon?
Well, I think exploring this, the lost treasure of Ching Hung, it's actually more than just, chasing a plot device from the show. We've touched on some pretty universal ideas here, haven't we? Things like immense value, what we consider valuable, the sting of a broken promise, a deal gone bad, and the whole nature of ownership itself, how it's defined, how it can be literally tied to a person, and of course hidden vulnerabilities. How even immense wealth or power can have an Achilles heel, especially when it's tied to one source, one being. These are big concepts, and seeing them play out even in a fantastical setting like this, it gives us a different way to think about them.
Yeah, exactly. So we've followed the journey of the lost treasure of Ching Shi Hung from this legendary promise, this almost unimaginable wealth,
Yeah.
all the way to its dramatic, sudden destruction, completely tied to its powerful and, yeah, pretty tricky owner, Shendu.
And maybe that leaves us with something to mull over, a final thought for you. What does this story, this treasure crumbling into dust because it was a possession fundamentally linked to its owner, what does that suggest about what true value or real ownership might mean, especially when power is involved?
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.